Welcome back to Cricket Aviation. My name is Jim Payne, and in this video we are going to fabricate and install the Frame 1B, the forward nose gear box, and the lower engine mount. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stick around. Thanks for watching. So I have most of the parts now cut out for Frame 1B and the nose gear box that all mounts directly behind Frame 1. These parts here are the side parts for the nose gear box that we have to bend the sides for, that mount to the back side of Frame 1B and behind Frame 1. Frame 1B is designed to go over the top of the frame rails that we've already installed. And we also have these tabs that need to be installed on the end that have to be bent to connect Frame 1B to the fuselage sides. So these side pieces that we have to install for the nose gear box are actually made out of 40 thousandths material, and I think I'm going to have to anneal these when I go to bend them. They need to get bent along the top here, they need to get bent along the front and the back, and across the bottom. Now across the bottom here, it actually needs to be curved to the shape of the fuselage, which means there is a slight curve in it, and we'll probably have to form these over a wooden block or form made out of MDF to get the shape correct. I'll do the same process where I use a Sharpie to mark each side of these and then heat them up to the correct temperature until the Sharpie goes away. Go ahead and dunk them in water to anneal them, to soften them up so that we can bend these. And what I've done is I've cut the bottom of these to the shape of the fuselage, and you can see if I put this straight edge up here that there's very tiny gap, barely a piece of paper's width on the top and the bottom of actual curve in this piece. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is just bending these on the bending brake and worry about creating the curve or the small bit of curve with just a rubber hammer or a mallet after the fact. I don't think it makes sense to bend these with an actual form. Now these tabs here that I cut out need to be bent at almost 90 degrees, actually 89 degrees, that fit on the front of Frame 1B here to just attach to the top of the pedal rails. We also have these parts that I cut out that are straps that connect to Frame 1 behind the engine mount. I don't actually think I'm going to bother installing these at this point. I went ahead and cut them because they were 40 thousandths and they were part of the other parts that I cut out. I think I'm going to start out by bending the side pieces for the side of the nose gear box first, and we'll see how that goes. Alright, I was able to bend the parts here for the nose gear box. I actually ended up bending 3 of them, as you can see here. The first one I ended up bending the wrong direction. I got the front and the rear of this frame mixed up, and the side that connects to Frame 1B here, which has holes in it, is supposed to be bent the opposite direction from the part that goes across the bottom. And I got the 2 ends mixed up. It's the other end that doesn't have the holes in it that's supposed to go along Frame 1. And so anyway, just be aware of that to make sure that you get the directions correct, because these do have to be bent different directions on this frame. Alright, so these other ones, I finished bending them. They came out pretty good. I did bend the joggle that goes in the end here that has to go around Frame 1. So I've got that in there. Otherwise, these look good. And so these actually get set up next to each other, similar to this. And a phenolic block gets installed in between them, and the nose gear leg actually goes through the center of that phenolic block that we have to drill a hole through at a 17-degree angle. So I'm going to go ahead and start fitting these in against Frame 1B, and I'll show you what it looks like when they're done. So I was able to start fitting some of these parts in here for the nose gear and the Frame 1B against Frame 1 here in the front. And so I was able to cut that phenolic block that goes in here. Now I actually purchased 1/2-inch phenolic block. That needs to be actually cut down eventually to 10 millimeters, which is the required thickness. I'm not going to cut it down though until I drill the hole through it, because the hole's got to be cut through it at around, I think, a 17-degree angle. And not only that, it's got to be a fairly large hole, and I'm guessing that when it starts that hole, it could be it could be a little bit off, and so I'm going to drill it through it, and then I'll cut it down to the correct surface so that I can get the hole that's down inside of that block, which is going to be the cleanest part of the hole, not the part where it started in at the angle. But anyway, so I've got the 2 ribs here just placed on either side. There's got to be 4 bolts that go down through that block to hold it into place. It gets riveted to this frame 1B that I just have sitting in here that goes over the frame rails, as you can see. And then on the front here, this is where we actually start installing the brackets and the plate that goes here that mounts the lower part of the engine mount. So there's a lower part of the engine mount here. It comes up and crosses somewhere around here. There's a big engine mount bracket that goes on either side that it mounts in these places, and it mounts down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is start making the parts for the engine mount here, so that I can start placing these in the right spot and start figuring out exactly where I need to drill these holes, so that I know where to drill into these ribs that support it. The other thing I'm going to do here next is go ahead and drill the 4 bolt holes into this phenolic block, so that I can locate and place the holes through these ribs exactly where they need to go. And then I should start being able to hone in on exactly where these need to go, so that I can start, drilling the rivet holes in place and the rivet holes in here, and start securing all of this together before we, final rivet it in place. You can see that frame 1B just touches and follows the exact contour of the skin over there, which is not 90 degrees. It's actually 1.7 degrees less. And same thing over on the other side. I'm always amazed that the plans are absolutely perfect. As if you made no mistakes and you cut everything perfect, it would fit exactly how it should, for the most part. I mean, some things are a little bit variable, like the spar box fitting between the fuselage, where I think you're better off fitting things afterwards. But I'm always impressed with how closely everything fits. It's as exact as you can get without custom fitting every part. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I'm just going to keep working on some more things here, and I'll come back and show you when I get a few more things done, such as drilling these holes in place and start working on this engine mount that goes in the front. We cut out the block here, this phenolic block, to support the nose gear, which is going to go through an angled hole here. So I'm not going to worry about drilling that hole at this point, but now that I have this block cut, I can position these frames here at the exact width based on the width of that block, which I believe is 48 millimeters. But now what I can do is start drilling the holes that attach these frames to the frame 1B here. So my goal right now is to just get center marking done on this and measure out exactly where those flanges should be positioned within this frame 1B, and then go ahead and get the holes that are already drilled into these supports drilled in through here. We'll get this held together with the temporary sheet metal fasteners. Then what we can do is take this assembly and start fitting it back into the airplane and start bending and drilling the attachment points for frame 1B in the back, and then also drill through frame 1 into the front of these nose gear support frames here. So we're just going to keep working on this, start fitting this stuff in here and making sure that I can get this all positioned the way it needs to be so we can finish it up. I've also got to drill through this flange here on the bottom into the bottom of the fuselage. So once we get this position, these side pieces marked and put in place, then we'll drill through the bottom and prepare that for riveting. I was able to finish most of the drilling out of all of the rivet holes for frame 1B and also the nose gear box here. I even got the brackets installed on the side that go through the fuselage on the outside. Now, one of the things that's working out really well is having used this 3/16 hardboard for my frame here, because I'm able to put the temporary sheet metal fasteners through that 3/16 frame because the grip length on the sheet metal fasteners is right around 1/4 inch. So you can see even down the center here, I was able to go up through the bottom and put sheet metal fasteners where, you know, I wouldn't be able to install them from the inside. And not only that, it helps keep this whole thing in the correct, you know, curvature and shape, being able to just go right through the form. So that's actually working out really well. I think I'm now at a point where I can take all this apart and actually clean up all these pieces and go ahead and allodyne them and permanently rivet them into place. Now I haven't drilled anything out to the 1/8 inch size, which is the actual rivet size of, I believe, almost all of these rivets. But I think what I'm going to do is wait until I go to actually install it, and then I can actually drill them out at that time when I'm installing the rivets. That'll give you the most accurate clean hole and aligned hole when I go ahead and do this. Let me think. The only thing I haven't finished, I think that we talked about, was I need to go ahead and bend these at 90 degrees. These are supposed to attach to the top of the cap here. They get drilled down in through the cap and get drilled into this frame to keep it at 90 degrees just as an extra support. I'm going to go ahead and bend those and probably drill those first before I pull this all apart. So I am going to finish in this video these parts that go here for the center mount for the engine mount, because that can connect out here. I've got the bolts and everything for this. We'll install these angles. I'll just do that as part of this, since it all attaches and secures this frame box for the nose gear. So let me go ahead and get these bent and get these installed, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done before I clean it all up and go ahead and final rivet it. I finished cutting out, drilling, and installing these angles here that go between the pedal rails and frame 1B. I had a lot of issues getting those two parts bent. As you can see here, I got a little bit of a fitting graveyard here. So this is what those fittings actually look like, this, and you have to basically take them and bend them different directions. Now, I was concerned about bending these because of the fact that these are different direction bends on here, and that because of this thicker material I might end up cracking these. So I decided to anneal these before I bent them, and I cut out 2 of them, annealed 2 of them, took them over to my bender and bent 2 of them, and 1 of them cracked. 1 of them was okay. So what I did then is I decided, well, I'm going to have to use a slightly larger radius. My bending brake, you know, has a very sharp edge on it, and I don't have a radius end on the tips of them. So other than backing off the brake a little bit on the bend to increase the radius, I don't have a method right now of getting a bigger radius bend on there. So what I was going to do is just go back to using a vise and using this 1/8 inch radius that's on here and clamping it into the vise and then just bending it around this radius. That's worked quite well for me on other parts, so I thought, well, why don't I just do that with this? So then I cut 2 more parts, and then I tried to bend both of those using this method on the vise, and both of those cracked. So then I went back and cut 2 more. Annealed, again, I was annealing all of these parts using the process of marking these with a Sharpie, heating them up until the Sharpie slightly disappeared or started to disappear, and then putting these in water and quenching them. So then the next ones that I did is I put this in the vise, and I started to bend this one, and you can see this one cracked right away, and I bent this one with my fingers. I stuck it in there and I just started bending it over with my fingers, and it cracked immediately. And so what I figured out is that I probably overheated these parts because they're so small, that when I put these in the torch and was heating them up, even though I was keeping track of the Sharpie and whether or not I was disappearing or not, I think I overheated these by heating them too much too quickly, and I actually made them very brittle. Because what I did then is I cut 2 more parts out. I didn't anneal them. I stuck them in the vise and bent them using this, and I had no problem at all bending them around this 1/8 inch radius, which I should not have had an issue bending those around this radius to begin with. So I guess the moral of the story is when you're trying to use that annealing process on smaller parts, you need to really take your time heating them up slowly, I think, to the right temperature, instead of just sticking them in the torch and heating them up and trying to get them, you know, done as quickly as possible. So I think that was a lesson learned for me. Now, the other lesson for me is I'm not going to anneal any parts that I don't absolutely have to. In other words, I'm going to try and bend everything I can. I'd rather even use a slightly bigger radius like I did here than try and anneal them to try and bend a tighter radius. In the long run, I'm concerned about the strength of these parts. Now, the one thing I will say is that this part was very soft when I got done doing that annealing process. I let this sit overnight. Today's the next day, and this part is very stiff now again. So it has retained a lot of its strength, or gotten back a lot of its strength that it lost during that annealing process, which was interesting to see because I wasn't really sure how that process happened, and if it happened. That was one of my concerns. Is you heat these parts up and they do get soft even when they're cooled back off again, but do they actually get back their strength? And it does appear that this got back majority of its strength. I can still bend it, but it's very hard to bend. Just wanted to point that out, that be careful with some of these parts if you're using that annealing process. Okay, so in addition to that, the other thing I did here is I had some scrap 1/8 inch material that was laying around here from some of the cutoffs from doing the wing spar caps. And I went ahead and made the 2 plates that go on the top and bottom here for the lower engine mount support. These are basically 50 millimeters wide, 16 millimeters tall, and then these holes are drilled on the ends that then match the holes on the nose gear box there. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get these in place, is to actually get these bolts in here, since that holds all of this together in the front. The other thing I'm going to do after this is I'm going to go ahead and create the angles that get mounted on the top of here that the bolt goes through to actually hold the engine mount. I'm going to get those in place also and get these completely done with the bolts in them, so that I know that this is all secured when we go ahead and rivet it together. So let me start making those angles, and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. So I just roughly cut out these angles that are going to be installed for the lower engine mount. I did want to point out these are 1/8 inch thick, and the angles that are supposed to go on the nose here only need to be 80 thousandths thick. So obviously these are 0.125 instead of 0.8 or 0.08. And of course I can't get an angle that's really between a 1/16 inch, which is 0.0625, and the 1/8 inch, which is 0.125. So what I'm going to do is actually put these on my mill and mill down the back side of these to just get them down to close to that 2 millimeters or 80 thousandths that we're supposed to have for these, just so they fit properly. So I'm going to mill these down and then go ahead and cut and shape these to fit on the front here. So I finished making the lower engine mount here. I went ahead and just made these brackets. These are just made out of those 1/8 inch angles that I mentioned. I did mill them down to about 80 thousandths, maybe a little bit more than that. But yeah, this is, I basically got all the holes drilled, and this mounts right to the front of here using these 4 bolts. So what I'm going to do now is I basically have everything done here in the front that I wanted to get done for this step. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and take all this apart, clean up all these parts, allodyne them, and then I'll go ahead and start riveting this stuff together. I don't think there's anything else I have to make, at least for this step anyway. And so yeah, let me take this apart, start cleaning it up, and I'll show you what it looks like after I get everything allodyned. So I'm just allodyning the last part, and I started assembling this back together. You can see I've got the motor mount engine mount bracket on the front, and I just put these ribs back in place. But I think what I'm going to do is actually drill these holes out and pop rivet this as I'm reinstalling everything. Part of the reason I wanted to do that was I wanted these ribs to be pulled up against a frame one as tight as they're intended to go before I drilled the holes out in the bottom. You don't want to really have anything loose, because especially when you got something pulling up here and you got rivets holding it down here, if I were to pop rivet that in place and then let's say there was a little bit of gap up here, it would want to pull these forward and pull against the rivets in a shear fashion, which we really don't want. So I'm trying to get it tight up here, then pop rivet it down there, then pop rivet the frame 1B across the front, then go and get these angles hidden here, and then get the corner parts in here. And I'm just going to kind of work my way through it and pop rivet this together. It should go pretty quick, and it's pretty easy. So I'm going to start drilling these out and pop riveting this together. I'll show you what it looks like when I get done here. So I was able to finish the installation of frame 1B and the lower nose gear box. This worked out really well, actually installing the lower engine mount to the nose gearbox frames, and then going on ahead and attaching the backside of frame 1B to these nose gearbox frames with the pop rivets, and then pop riveting all of this then down to the bottom of the fuselage. And I was able to drill all of that kind of as I went, so that seemed to work pretty well. And you can see I've got the brackets there installed for the frame 1B that attaches to the pedal rails. So yeah, this all came out real well. And so the next thing we're going to start working on is frame 2.